The outsider seemed to have forgotten his proper station, a recurring oversight. Raphaelon's pronouncements were laced with sheer arrogance, as his cartel convoys idled beneath the relentless Texas sun, dust plumes swirling around their tires. He perceived Zeke as a proud, black landowner who dared to stand too defiantly on ground he was never destined to possess, a man tragically foolish enough to challenge genuine authority. That same evening, Rafa's enforcers returned, equipped with accelerants and firearms, setting the Monroe estate ablaze. The inferno climbed skyward, a terrifying spectacle. Their intent was to obliterate him. Instead, it ignited something far more potent, and Zeke journeyed southward, accompanied by 15 elite Navy SEALs. Before we delve deeper, please share your viewing location in the comments, and ensure you subscribe, as tomorrow's narrative is one you absolutely will not want to miss. The midday Texan sun beat down with unforgiving intensity upon Monroe Ranch, transforming the atmosphere into a shimmering mirage. Chickens pecked languidly at the parched earth, seeking sustenance amongst the dry soil. This idyllic scene was violently interrupted as 3 pristine white pickup trucks thundered up the dusty lane, their engines emitting a guttural roar akin to enraged predators. Each vehicle was outfitted with mounted weaponry, the metal barrels glinting under the sun's harsh glare. Zeke Monroe, emerged from the cool shadow of the barn, his dark navy t-shirt clinging damply to his broad shoulders. He wiped his brow with a bandana, his brown overalls bearing the marks of his morning labor. His gaze narrowed as he counted 12 armed men disembarking from the trucks. Rafael Leon was the last to emerge, moving with the unhurried assurance of a man accustomed to absolute compliance. His gold chain, heavy against his bare chest, caught the sunlight where his shirt hung open. A cruel smirk graced his features as he approached, his boots crunching audibly on the gravel. "Quite the establishment you have here, Monroe," Rafa announced, gesturing expansively with his arms. "It would be a tragedy if something were to befall it." Hector, Rafa's second-in-command, positioned himself beside his boss, his hand resting on the butt of his holstered sidearm. The remaining cartel operatives fanned out into a loose semicircle, their rifles held casually yet poised for action. "State your purpose and depart," Zeke declared, his voice deep and unwavering, his posture remaining relaxed, though his eyes meticulously tracked every individual's movement. Rafa produced a folded document from his rear pocket, waving it like a banner. "Merely a simple document requiring your signature. A transfer of water rights, at a fair valuation, I might add." His smile widened. "Consider it a remarkably generous proposal." "This land is not for sale," Zeke countered firmly, "and neither are the water rights. My grandmother's will is explicit on that matter." "Your grandmother?" Rafa scoffed, the sound sharp and mocking. "Deceased women have no need for water, my friend." Zeke's jaw tightened. "My answer remains no." Rafa's smile evaporated instantly. With 2 swift strides, he pressed the cold, metallic cylinder of a chrome pistol against Zeke's cheek. The metal felt searingly hot from the sun's heat. "Perhaps you did not comprehend my words correctly." Zeke did not flinch. His dark eyes remained locked with Rafa's, unwavering and devoid of fear. The air between them crackled with a palpable tension, much like the static electricity preceding a tempest. A police SUV appeared, its lights extinguished and sirens silent. Sheriff Dalton Briggs stepped out, shielding his eyes from the glare with a hand as he adjusted his hat. His boots kicked up dust as he approached, his badge gleaming prominently. "Now what seems to be the disturbance here?" Briggs inquired casually, feigning ignorance. His hand rested near his service weapon. "Sheriff," Zeke acknowledged, his gaze still fixed on Rafa. "These individuals are trespassing." Briggs clicked his tongue in mild disapproval. "From my perspective, this appears to be a straightforward business discussion." He moved closer, positioning himself slightly towards Rafa's contingent. "Mr. Leon here has some legitimate vested interests in local water rights. It might be prudent to lend him an ear." "Legitimate." Zeke's voice carried a dangerous undertone. "Since when does legitimate commerce involve armed individuals and explicit threats?" "Times are indeed challenging," Briggs stated smoothly. "For your own well-being, you might consider cooperating. Reflect upon your current predicament." The standoff intensified, taut as a stretched wire. Then one of Rafa's men, a sneering grin on his face, deliberately kicked Zeke's aging cattle dog as it lay napping in the shade. The dog yelped, scrambling away in pain. Something inside Zeke fractured. His initial punch landed squarely on the throat of the man who had kicked his dog. The assailant crumpled, gasping for air. Utter pandemonium erupted across the yard. Two cartel enforcers surged towards Zeke from opposing directions. He seized a shovel leaning against the barn wall, twirling it like a seasoned warrior. The stout wooden handle connected with one attacker's wrist with a sharp, sickening crack. The man cried out in agony, his firearm clattering onto the dirt. Zeke's military conditioning was evident in his every economical, precise, and deadly movement. He ducked beneath a wild, swinging blow and drove his forehead into another attacker's nose. The sound of crunching cartilage echoed as blood sprayed. Hector lunged forward, brandishing a knife, but Zeke was prepared. With a single fluid motion, he unwound the heavy chain from his waist, whipping it out to ensnare Hector's weapon-wielding hand. A sharp tug disarmed him instantly. The air filled with a cacophony of curses, in both English and Spanish, punctuated by the scuffing of boots on the dusty ground. Zeke moved with the fluidity of water, each strike meticulously calculated and brutally effective. Another assailant fell, clutching his ribs. The distinct sound of scattering teeth was heard on the ground. A staccato volley of machine gun fire ripped through the air. Everyone froze as bullets tore through the sky above them. A profound silence descended. Zeke stood at the epicenter of the chaos, his chest heaving. A trickle of blood coursed from a split lip, but his eyes blazed with suppressed fury. Around him lay groaning cartel soldiers, some clutching broken limbs, others attempting to crawl away. Sheriff Briggs approached, handcuffs extended, but instead of confronting Rafa or his men, he seized Zeke's wrists. "You are under arrest for assault and disturbing the peace." Rafa dabbed at his bleeding lip with a silk handkerchief, a returning smirk playing on his lips as he observed Briggs securing the cuffs. The metallic click seemed to reverberate across the now eerily silent ranch yard. Through the grimy window of the patrol car, Zeke watched his estate recede into the distance. His hands throbbed where the skin had split during the confrontation, dried blood darkening the spaces between his fingers. The handcuffs dug into his wrist with every jolt of the car as it traversed the uneven road. Sheriff Briggs adjusted his rearview mirror, catching Zeke's eye. "You just had to complicate matters, didn't you?" He shook his head. This could have been a peaceful afternoon. Zeke remained silent, his jaw set resolutely. The memory of his dog's pained yelp seared his mind. At the station, they led him past holding cells populated by the usual weekend offenders, drunks and minor troublemakers. A few offered nods of recognition. Zeke had tended to some of their injuries during his tenure as an army medic. The deputies ushered him into an interrogation room where Briggs was already waiting, his sleeves rolled up and his hat resting on the table. "Let's discuss your decisions today," Briggs began, leaning back in his chair. The harsh glare of the fluorescent lights cast deep shadows across his face. "Violence is not the solution, son. Not in my jurisdiction. Those men were armed and on my property," Zeke stated plainly. "They threatened me." "Mr. Lane was here to discuss a business proposition," Briggs countered, his voice laced with feigned concern. "You escalated the situation. It could have become exceedingly dangerous." Through the room's window, Zeke observed Rafa's men being quietly escorted out a rear exit. No handcuffs, no charges filed, merely handshakes and nods exchanged with deputies. His hands clenched involuntarily, causing fresh blood to well up from his fractured knuckles. "You'll spend the night contemplating your actions," Briggs announced, rising to his feet. "Perhaps by tomorrow you'll be more amenable." The holding cell was cold and carried the distinct odor of bleach. Zeke sat on the metal bench, his back erect, eyes closed. He focused on his breathing, a technique honed during his military service, slow, controlled, suppressing the rage that yearned for release. Morning arrived with the distinct click of Isabel Cruz's heels echoing down the corridor. She wore a sharply tailored black blazer. Despite the early hour, her tablet clutched beneath one arm. Zeke had known her since she established her legal aid clinic 3 years prior, assisting local farmers in their battles against exploitative land acquisition schemes. "You look rather disheveled," she commented as the cell door swung open. "Let's extract you from this predicament." At her vehicle, she offered him a coffee and antiseptic wipes for his hands. "This is not a random occurrence, Zeke. Clay Harlow is orchestrating this." "The property developer?" Zeke dabbed at his knuckles, wincing. Isabel nodded, retrieving her tablet. "Silver Dominion LLC, his company, filed emergency environmental remediation paperwork yesterday. They are asserting that your land is contaminated and requires immediate confiscation. That is preposterous. We recently had the soil analyzed for organic certification. Facts hold no sway with them." She presented him with documents, drawing his attention to highlighted passages. "Harlow possesses connections within the county administration. They will expedite this process unless we mount a vigorous defense." Zeke scrutinized the papers, his expression darkening. "And Rafa, that's where things become rather intriguing." Isabel swiped to another screen. "Someone has been exceptionally busy within the property databases. Pre-filed deeds under Leon's name, permits backdated. They are fabricating a documentary trail, making it appear as though he possesses a prior claim," Zeke surmised. "Precisely. Briggs is providing a diversion while they construct their legal snare." She gently touched his arm. "We must proceed with extreme caution. These individuals do not adhere to fair play." After signing release forms, Zeke borrowed Isabel's mobile phone to contact his neighbor regarding the care of his livestock. His own phone remained with the evidence custodians, along with his wallet and keys. The station was obligated to return them, but they were deliberately delaying the process. By late afternoon, Zeke finally began his journey homeward in his dust-covered pickup truck. The sun hung low on the horizon, a fiery orb painting the landscape in hues of burnt copper. His hands ached on the steering wheel. Isabel had properly bandaged them, but the bruising ran deep. Approximately 1 mile from his ranch, a flicker of movement caught his attention. 3 white pickup trucks were parked on an elevated ridge overlooking his property. Even from this distance he could discern the silhouettes of men standing beside them, their forms distorted by the heat waves rising from the ground, observing, anticipating. Zeke's jaw tightened as he drove past. He could feel their intense scrutiny, their presence a palpable message. This confrontation was far from concluded. The trucks remained visible in his rearview mirror until he turned onto his own driveway, dark shapes against the fading twilight. His dog limped out to greet him, favoring the leg that had been kicked. Zeke knelt in the dust, gently stroking the animal, examining it for any serious injury. Finding only bruising, he scratched behind the dog's ears. "We're all right, old friend," he murmured. "We're all right." But as he rose to his feet, his gaze was drawn to the distant observers on the hill. The ochre sky seemed to ignite behind them, and the evening breeze carried dust that tasted of impending trouble. The kitchen was eerily silent, save for the soft patter of dog claws on the linoleum floor. Zeke barely touched his dinner, a portion of leftover stew, reheated in the microwave. His bandaged hands made holding the spoon an awkward endeavor. His dog lay at his feet, still favoring its injured leg. From his seated position, he could see a photograph of Mama Ruth displayed on the windowsill. She stood regally in her finest Sunday attire, one hand on her hip, the other holding aloft the original ranch deed like a triumphant banner. The same indomitable spirit that had seen her through the era of segregation and civil rights marches was etched into every line of her face. "What would you advise, Mama?" he whispered. The crickets outside chirped their nightly serenade, a familiar cadence that usually brought a sense of peace. But tonight an unsettling feeling permeated the air. Zeke set down his spoon, listening intently. Beneath the chirping of the crickets, he detected a low rumble of engines, and something else. The distinct aroma of diesel fumes drifted on the breeze through his open window. His dog's head lifted, its ears perked attentively. Then, simultaneously, they both heard it. Laughter, faint but discernible, male voices speaking Spanish, growing closer. The first hint of an orange glow reflected off his kitchen window before he saw the actual flames. The hay barn erupted as if struck by a match, the gasoline transforming the dry fodder into a raging inferno. The night exploded into vibrant shades of crimson and gold as the fire greedily consumed the wooden structure. No! Zeke sprang from his chair, nearly tripping over his dog. He grabbed his mobile phone and bolted outside, the intense heat hitting him like a physical blow. More flames burst forth. They had also doused the stables. Above the roaring inferno, he heard a cry of distress. Mr. Palomo, his elderly neighbor, who sometimes slept in the stable loft while working late. Zeke sprinted towards the burning building. Smoke stung his eyes as he shouldered his way through the door. "Mr. Palomo, where are you?" "Here, help." The voice, weak and choked with smoke, emanated from above. The staircase was already succumbing to the flames, but Zeke ascended it 2 steps at a time. He found Mr. Palomo collapsed near his cot, coughing uncontrollably. The old man's eyes were bloodshot and streaming. "I've got you," Zeke reassured him, pulling him to his feet. "Keep your head down." Below, the horses shrieked, kicking their stalls in a state of sheer panic. Zeke half-carried Mr. Palomo down the burning stairs, the wood groaning and cracking beneath their feet. They stumbled out into the yard just as a section of the roof caved in behind them. Zeke rushed back to release the horses, but the heat was now unbearable. The animals' terrified whinnies pierced him like shards of glass. He was forced to retreat, utterly helpless, as the flames consumed everything. Through the wall of fire, he glimpsed figures positioned just beyond his property line. The orange light glinted off rifle barrels and bared white teeth as Rafa's men watched, laughing and passing bottles amongst themselves. They had come to savor the spectacle. Zeke snatched his phone, dialing 911. The dispatcher assured him that deputies were en route, but minutes stretched into an eternity. Then half an hour passed with no sirens in evidence. When he called again, they claimed the responding units were encountering difficulties locating the address. Mr. Palomo sat in the dirt, an oxygen mask from Zeke's old medical kit secured to his face. Zeke attempted to salvage what he could, but the fire had spread too extensively, its intensity too great. It leaped from building to building, from barn to stables to storage sheds. Years of meticulous maintenance and cherished family history vanished in mere minutes. The smoke was suffocating. Zeke's lungs burned as he made one last desperate dash towards the house. He managed to secure a few indispensable items, his grandmother's journal, some photographs, and crucial documents before the flames encroached upon the back porch. He collapsed in the yard, coughing so violently that he retched. The journal in his hands was already scorched around the edges, its leather cover hot to the touch. Through tear-filled eyes, he watched his family's legacy dissolve into ash. The cartel men's laughter echoed in his ears, mingling with the crackle of burning wood and the final, frightened neighs of dying horses. His dog pressed against his leg, whimpering softly. Hours elapsed. The fire raged until it extinguished itself as the false dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. Zeke remained motionless, kneeling in the dirt where he had fallen. Thin ribbons of smoke curled skyward from the blackened ruins of the Monroe Ranch. The air was thick with the scent of char, gasoline, and profound loss. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He retrieved it with trembling hands, his gaze fixed on the screen. A number he hadn't contacted in years appeared. Saint. His finger hovered over the green answer button. The desert sun hammered the deserted parking lot of Rose's Diner, a faded structure situated beside the highway just outside El Paso. Heat waves danced off abandoned vehicles, their paint peeling under the unforgiving Texas climate. Inside, ceiling fans rotated lazily over worn vinyl booths and tables with chrome edges. Zeke occupied the furthest corner, his back to the wall, his eyes fixed on the entrance. His grandmother's charred journal lay on the table before him, a stark reminder of his loss. The waitress had ceased attempting to refill his coffee an hour ago, leaving him to his solitary thoughts and the low hum of the refrigerator. The bell above the door chimed. A man entered, tall, of Latino descent, in his mid-40s, clad in a simple black t-shirt and jeans. Silver strands threaded through his closely cropped hair, and old scars marked his forearms. His eyes scanned the diner with practiced efficiency before settling on Zeke. Javier St. Santoro slid into the booth without a word. For a protracted moment the two men regarded each other, years of shared combat experience hanging palpably in the air between them. "You appear utterly wretched," Saint finally stated, his voice gravelly yet warm. "I feel even worse." Zeke's hands remained bandaged from the recent altercation and the fire. The waitress approached, but Saint gently waved her away with a subtle smile. He gestured toward Zeke's scorched journal. "Tell me." Zeke spoke in a low voice, recounting the entire harrowing episode. Rafa's threats, Briggs's complicity, Harlow's predatory land acquisition, and ultimately the fiery destruction of his ranch. He described the horse's terrified screams, Mr. Palomo's near-fatal ordeal, and the callous laughter of the men who had witnessed its devastation. His voice remained steady, but his hands balled into fists on the table. Saint listened intently, his expression growing progressively grim with each detail. When Zeke concluded, a profound silence settled within the booth. Outside, a truck rumbled past on the highway. 15, Saint uttered simply. Zeke looked up sharply. "That was years ago, Afghanistan. I was merely fulfilling my duty as a medic." "You extracted 7 of us from that ambush," Saint countered, his voice firm. "You carried Doc for 3 miles with a bullet lodged in your own leg." Saint leaned forward. "We do not forget obligations of that magnitude." He produced his mobile phone and sent a single text message. Within moments, responses began to flood in. The subsequent 24 hours unfolded in a whirlwind of meticulous activity. They relocated to an abandoned warehouse on the city's periphery. One by one, the others arrived. Men and women with whom Zeke had served, each possessing specialized skills honed through years of rigorous special operations training. Rook was the first, the team's undisputed master breacher, his truck laden with equipment that officially did not exist. Then came Diesel, their expert in all things vehicular, followed by Moose, whose imposing physique belied his proficiency in stealthy infiltration. Doc arrived, accompanied by essential medical supplies and a robust embrace for Zeke. Their shared background as combat medics forged an immediate and deep connection. Vega, their drone surveillance specialist, brought a case filled with custom-made reconnaissance equipment. Her sharp wit was already devising aerial observation patterns. Fable, the team's communications expert, established a mobile command center, setting up secure encrypted channels and robust digital defenses. Others filtered in throughout the day, faces Zeke recalled from his deployment, all responding to Saint's summons without the slightest hesitation. They convened around a makeshift planning table, poring over satellite imagery and property records. Zeke meticulously detailed everything Isabel had uncovered regarding Harlow's shell corporations and Briggs's corruption. Saint marked key locations, Rafa's clandestine compounds, front operations for money laundering, and established smuggling routes. "This is not merely about retribution," Zeke declared to the assembled group. "It is about achieving justice, about demonstrating that one cannot simply obliterate whomever they choose simply because they refuse to be bought." The team members nodded in agreement. They understood that this was not a conventional military operation, but a reckoning, an opportunity to leverage their formidable skills for a purpose of pure integrity. As darkness descended, they loaded 3 unmarked vehicles with their operational gear. Weapons were meticulously checked, communication systems tested, and medical supplies distributed. Every action was executed with seamless efficiency, a testament to the muscle memory ingrained from countless shared missions. They crossed the Rio Grande under the shroud of night, utilizing old ranch roads and dry creek beds to circumvent official border crossings. The frontier stretched before them, a demarcation line drawn in sand and political rhetoric that held no significance for the truth they carried. Zeke occupied the lead vehicle, with Saint at the wheel beside him. The scorched journal rested on his lap, its damaged pages bearing the narrative of his grandmother's life, her valiant struggle against segregation, her unwavering conviction in standing up to oppressors, and her profound dream of land that would remain within the family's possession eternally. The convoy navigated the desert terrain, headlights deactivated, relying on night vision for guidance. Dust settled in their path as they passed, the moon painting the scene in silvery hues. "They torched your homestead," Saint remarked softly, his gaze fixed on the asphalt ahead. Let's torch their entire dominion. The words hung heavy in the air, a silent vow as their vehicle plunged deeper into cartel territory. 15 seasoned operatives, moving like phantoms under the cloak of night, their hands armed with instruments of justice. The desert stretched out, an endless expanse promising both concealment and a witness to the impending reckoning. As dawn broke, it bathed the border village in amber and dust. The abandoned citrus packing facility stood sentinel at the town's edge, its concrete walls bearing the indelible marks of decades of sun and neglect. Within its cavernous interior, the aroma of aged fruit mingled with the scent of rust. Towering metal shelves formed shadowed canyons, perfect for covert positioning. Vega's drone hummed to life in the pre-dawn twilight, ascending above the warehouse like a mechanical dragonfly. She sat cross-legged atop a stack of empty crates, her tablet displaying thermal imagery of the surrounding terrain. Saint and Moose flanked her, intently studying the feed. "Rafa's stronghold," Vega whispered, directing their attention to a sprawling estate nestled in the Sierra foothills. 3 defensive perimeters, guard posts positioned here, here, and here. Minimum of 20 armed personnel on rotation. The drone's lens zoomed, revealing intricate details of the cartel leader's fortress. Imposing walls topped with razor wire, surrounding Mediterranean-style architecture, and luxury vehicles gleaming under the morning sun. Armed patrols moved with military precision, their weapons clearly visible even from their vantage point. "Briggs visits bi-weekly," Fable chimed in from his command center, a room dominated by monitors displaying intercepted communications. "Always on Thursdays, Harlow's Shell Corporation's wire funds." The following day, his fingers danced across the keyboards, tracing digital footprints through encrypted channels. Zeke stood at a hastily assembled planning table, his hands meticulously tracing potential infiltration routes across topographical maps spread out before him, his military training kicking in with familiar muscle memory. Doc had rebandaged his burns and cuts that morning, the ranch fire having left its painful mark. "Discovered their transit lines," Rook announced, marking the map with a red marker. "They funnel product north through these valleys. Funds return south via wire transfers, and these 3 commercial enterprises within the warehouse loading bay." Diesel had prepared a training zone. Old fruit crates served as obstacles, and hanging chains simulated combat engagements. He beckoned Zeke over. "Time to knock the rust off, farmer," Diesel quipped with a grin, adopting a fighting stance. Zeke shed his shirt, revealing the scars of his military past. They circled each other on the concrete floor, their feet moving in practiced rhythms. Diesel initiated, a swift flurry of blows that Zeke effortlessly deflected. His muscle memory returned like a long-lost companion. They sparred for hours, sweat mingling with the pervasive dust. Diesel imparted new techniques, helping Zeke adapt his combat medic skills to more aggressive tactics. The warehouse echoed with the percussive sounds of impact and controlled breaths. "You're looking sharper," Saint commented from the sidelines. "But we need to move soon. Received word of a cartel convoy tonight." As dusk descended, they gathered their equipment. Silenced rifles were meticulously checked and rechecked. Night vision goggles were adjusted. Communications were tested one final time. They established an ambush on a desolate stretch of road winding through scrubland. Rook and Moose strategically placed flashbangs in the ditches. Vega's drone provided aerial reconnaissance, its thermal camera tracking heat signatures approaching from the south. 3 vehicles, her voice crackled through their earpieces. 2 escort trucks, a van in the center, 11 heat signatures. Zeke lay prone behind a rocky outcrop, his rifle held steady. The desert night was frigid, the stars sharp and clear overhead. He controlled his breathing, just as Doc had instructed him years ago in Afghanistan. The convoy's headlights pierced the darkness first. They waited until the vehicles entered the designated kill zone. "Execute," Saint whispered. Flashbangs detonated, erupting in a blinding, chaotic display. The vehicles swerved violently, brakes screeching. Before the cartel operatives could react, silenced rifle fire erupted from multiple positions. The precision was absolute. No wasted rounds, no collateral damage. Once the engagement concluded, they acted with swift efficiency. Diesel hotwired the van while others salvaged weapons and mobile devices from the fallen. Rook planted demolition charges to obliterate the vehicles, erasing any trace of their presence. Zeke stood over one of the deceased, a young man whose neck bore cartel tattoos, the same markings he'd seen on the men who set his ranch ablaze. Blood stained the dust beneath him. "That's one less phantom haunting my land," Zeke stated quietly, his voice carrying in the stillness of the desert. Back at the warehouse, Fable meticulously sifted through the seized mobile devices. Encrypted messages revealed shipment schedules, payment records, and incriminating conversations between Rafa, Briggs, and Harlow. The network of corruption unfurled before them like a venomous spider's web. "Look at this!" Fable exclaimed, pointing to his screen. "Briggs is meeting Rafa tomorrow night. Something about finalizing the Monroe situation." The team converged around the planning table as night enveloped the village. Maps were updated with fresh intelligence, weapons were cleaned and prepared. The warehouse buzzed with focused activity as they geared up for their next operation. Outside, an owl hooted in the darkness. Inside, 15 operatives moved like shadows through the dim light, each carrying a fragment of Zeke's justice. The night air grew cool, seeping through the warehouse's fractured windows, carrying with it the promise of what was to come. Sanro's streets shimmered under the intense afternoon sun. Buildings appeared faded, like ancient photographs. Laundry hung listlessly between balconies, and local vendors began packing up early as the white trucks rumbled through. Music drifted from the cantina, ranchera melodies intertwining with the clinking of glasses and hushed conversations. The team dispersed into smaller units, effortlessly blending into the local populace with practiced ease. Zeke and Saint entered the cantina first, taking seats at the worn, scarred wooden bar. The establishment exuded the aroma of stale beer and cigarettes. A ceiling fan spun lazily overhead, doing little to stir the thick, heavy air. The waitress, a young woman with tired eyes, brought them beers without making eye contact. Her hands trembled subtly as she placed the bottles on the counter. At a corner table, 3 of Rafa's lieutenants lounged with an air of kingly entitlement, their firearms visible beneath their loose shirts. Hector sat at the center, his tattooed arms draped across the back of his chair. "Hey, Princesa," Hector called out, his voice slicing through the music. "More tequila, and try not to spill it this time, you clumsy girl." The waitress hurried to comply, but her trembling hands betrayed her fear. As she approached their table, one of the men deliberately stuck out his foot. She stumbled, the tray crashing to the floor. Tequila and shattered glass cascaded across the worn floorboards. "Clumsy bitch," Hector guffawed, rising to his feet. He seized her arm roughly. "That's coming out of your wages. Maybe we should take it another way." The other patrons averted their gaze, their shoulders hunched. This was the way of things in Sanro. You kept quiet. You survived. But Zeke was already moving, his bar stool scraping backward. "Let her go," he commanded, his voice calm, yet possessing an authority that froze the room. Hector's head snapped around, recognition and rage contorting his features. "The cowboy," he spat. "A long way from your burnt-out ranch, you fool." "Last warning," Zeke replied. "Take your hands off her." The lieutenant shoved the waitress aside and reached for his pistol. He never completed the motion. Zeke's first punch struck Hector's throat, crushing his windpipe. As Hector gasped for air, his men surged from the table. The bar erupted into controlled chaos. Saint swiftly neutralized 2 gunmen with brutal efficiency, disarming one and using him as a shield against the other. Rook and Diesel appeared from their positions near the entrance, moving with fluid grace. A cartel soldier swung a bottle at Zeke's head. He ducked, intercepted the man's wrist, and drove his elbow into the attacker's face, the sickening crunch of bone echoing. Another lunged at him with a knife, but Zeke trapped the blade between his palms and twisted, snapping the man's fingers. Hector recovered enough to draw his weapon, but Zeke was prepared. He grabbed the lieutenant's wrist, redirecting the barrel toward the ceiling as it discharged. The shot deafened the room. Zeke headbutted Hector, then seized his shirt and hurled him through a nearby table. Wood splintered. Hector lay groaning amidst the wreckage. 20 seconds. That's all it took. 6 of Rafa's men lay incapacitated or unconscious. No civilian casualties, no collateral damage, only precision and purpose. Vega's miniature drone hovered near the ceiling, documenting the entire event. The footage would be uploaded online within the hour, meticulously edited to protect their operational security while showcasing Zeke's defiance against tyranny. Zeke knelt beside the fallen waitress, gently helping her to her feet. He pressed a thick wad of currency into her palm, money seized from the cartel's own couriers. "For the damage," he said softly, "and for your courage in serving them daily." She stared at him, her eyes wide, then whispered, "Thank you, sir." Around the bar, other patrons began to straighten up, gazing at the fallen cartel enforcers with dawning hope. Saint tossed a mobile device to Hector, who was still dazed on the floor. "Call your boss. Tell him what happened here. Tell him the black cowboy sends his regards." They departed the cantina as sirens wailed in the distance, the local authorities who would, as usual, arrive inconveniently late. The team melted away through back alleys and prearranged routes, regrouping at their warehouse base. Fable's computers were already transmitting the footage through secure channels. Within hours, it spread across social media like wildfire. The black ranchers standing up to cartel thugs. Justice delivered in 20 seconds of righteous retribution. Miles to the north, in her legal aid office, Isabel watched the footage on multiple screens. She had been compiling cases against Briggs and Harlow for weeks, but this was different. This was visual confirmation of the cartel's iron grip on border towns and evidence that it could be broken. She began making calls to trusted journalists, individuals who wouldn't suppress the story. "I have documentation of corruption linking a Texas sheriff to cartel violence," she stated, "and now I have footage demonstrating the extent of it." The story gained traction. Local news outlets picked it up first, followed by national media. Comment sections overflowed with support for the enigmatic black cowboy defending the defenseless. Even those who typically endorsed Briggs's tough-on-crime policies found it difficult to justify the harassment captured on camera. In his secluded hillside compound, Rafaelin watched the viral clip for the 10th time. Ice clinked in his glass as his hand trembled with fury. The screen displayed Zeke Monroe, the man who should have been broken by fire and fear, standing tall in Rafa's territory, shattering his men like twigs. The glass met the wall, shattering. Tequila dripped down the expensive wallpaper as Rafa turned to his remaining lieutenants. "Find the black cowboy," he snarled, "and bury him." The order echoed through the room, but for the first time his men looked uncertain. The video had shown them something new, their own vulnerability, and in Sanro, whispers began to circulate about the rancher who refused to break. Darkness descended upon Sanro like a heavy shroud. Within the disused citrus warehouse, lantern light cast elongated shadows across makeshift operational tables. The air was thick with the scent of dust and aged fruit, mingled with gun oil and strong coffee. Zeke leaned over detailed satellite maps spread across wooden crates, his fingers tracing clandestine supply routes through the mountainous terrain. Saint stood beside him, his weathered countenance serious in the yellow illumination. The other operatives worked with quiet diligence, cleaning firearms, checking equipment, and monitoring communications. "Rafa's primary compound is located here," Saint stated, tapping a red marker on the map. "However, his financial transactions flow through these 3 municipalities." His finger traced a triangular path across the map. Each transfer point is heavily fortified. Diesel, their explosive specialist, indicated a narrow mountain pass. "We could establish a position here," he suggested, forcing their convoy into a bottleneck. In a corner of the warehouse, partially obscured by stacked equipment, Marcus Fable Lang hunched over his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. To any casual observer, he appeared to be diligently performing his duties, monitoring communications and maintaining their secure network. However, Fable was composing a different kind of message. Subject: Monroe Operation Update to Handler 47. Status: Critical. Target: expanding influence in border region. Local support growing following Cantina incident. Team planning aggressive actions against cartel infrastructure. Request immediate guidance on containment protocols. He encrypted the message using a hidden protocol, separate from the team's standard communication channels. His handler's response arrived within minutes. Priority: protect Asset Leon. DOJ-DA operations require his continued cooperation. Redirect Monroe team. Employ extreme measures if necessary. Fable's hands trembled slightly as he deleted the exchange. The burden of his clandestine mission weighed upon him, a palpable force. He believed in law and order, in the established system. But witnessing Zeke's actions, observing the justice he delivered to forgotten places, made everything feel less certain. "Fable," Saint called out, "what's our communication situation for tomorrow?" "All secure," he replied, his voice steady. "I've deployed repeaters throughout the hills. We'll maintain contact even if they attempt jamming." Yet even as he spoke, he was already coding a subtle backdoor into their systems, a means to scramble their signals at a critical juncture, making it appear as cartel interference. The warehouse's metal walls creaked in the night wind. Rook and Vega returned from a perimeter sweep, reporting all clear. The team settled back into their planning rhythm, marking targets, calculating trajectories, and preparing for the following day's operation. Zeke's phone vibrated. Isabel's name illuminated the screen. "Got something," she stated without preamble when he answered. "Been digging through Harlow's shell companies. Found a pattern of payments to DEA front operations." Zeke placed the phone on speaker, allowing the team to hear the nature of these payments. Consulting fees, property acquisitions, all channeled through firms traceable to known DEA shell entities. But here's the peculiar part. The timing aligns perfectly with Rafa's expansion into new territories. Every time he gains ground, Harlow's companies make payments. Saint's expression darkened. "They're in league. The DEA, the cartel, and your corrupt developer. It's bigger than we imagined." Isabel continued. "This isn't solely about your ranch, Zeke. They are constructing something, utilizing Rafa's violence to clear the path, then swooping in with legitimate development." Fable listened intently, a knot tightening in his stomach. He understood the full extent of it, how the DEA leveraged Rafa to control the border drug trade, suppressing smaller cartels while funneling intelligence upward. It was grim, but it was policy. And now, Zeke's crusade threatened to expose everything. While the team was engaged with Isabel's call, Fable discreetly accessed a separate system. He began uploading doctored shipping manifests and purchase orders for restricted weaponry, all meticulously crafted to implicate Zeke's operation. Just enough fabricated evidence to justify a federal intervention, if deemed necessary. "We hit their finances tomorrow," Zeke declared after concluding the call. "Cut off Rafa's cash flow. Force them to reveal their hand." The team nodded in agreement, but Fable foresaw the plans unraveling before it even commenced. His manipulated data was already circulating through law enforcement networks, portraying Zeke as an arms dealer, a threat far more insidious than the cartel he opposed. Zeke paused his planning, a slight frown creasing his brow. Something felt amiss. A soldier's intuition warned him of unseen peril. He scanned the warehouse shadows, the faces of his trusted team, searching for what his gut was trying to convey. Outside, diesel engines rumbled in the distance, cartel trucks moving northward under the cover of darkness, transporting money, narcotics, and secrets that reached all the way to Washington. The sound carried on the dry wind, mingling with the creaking of old warehouse beams and the soft clicks of weapons being meticulously checked one last time. Fable closed his laptop, concealing his screen as Zeke walked past. They exchanged nods, a gesture of trust that felt like acid in Fable's throat. Tomorrow's mission loomed before them, heavy with the unspoken weight of impending betrayal. Dawn painted the sky in hues of purple and orange, the sun yet to crest the eastern hills. In a dry riverbed carved deep into the earth, Zeke lay prone behind a cluster of sun-bleached rocks, his rifle scope sweeping the dirt road above, awaiting. Beside him, Saint checked his watch. 5 minutes, he whispered. The team was strategically positioned along both sides of the riverbed, concealed within natural shooting positions. Diesel and Rook occupied the higher ground, armed with 50 caliber rifles. Vega and Doc, equipped with medical kits and breaching charges, were nestled in the brush below. The remaining operatives were strategically placed, forming a perfect kill box. Fable's voice crackled through their earpieces. Convoy approaching from the south. 4 vehicles, 2 lead trucks, money in the central van, rear security. The roar of engines grew louder. Dust clouds appeared on the horizon. Zeke steadied his breathing, embracing the familiar calm of combat. The morning air felt cool against his skin, carrying the scent of creosote and gunpowder. The convoy rounded the bend. White pickup trucks bristled with armed men, a reinforced van in the center, all moving swiftly yet confidently. They had no reason to anticipate trouble in this deep-seated territory. "Wait for it," Saint murmured. The vehicles entered the kill zone. Diesel squeezed his trigger. The first shot thundered across the riverbed, piercing the lead truck's engine block in a geyser of oil and steam. The truck swerved violently, blocking the road. "Execute," Saint commanded. The riverbed exploded with action. Coordinated rifle fire ripped into the convoy from multiple angles. Tires detonated. Windshields shattered. Cartel gunmen dove for cover, returning fire blindly. Zeke rolled to his right as bullets kicked up dirt around him. He spotted 3 men taking cover behind their disabled truck. In one fluid motion, he dropped to his stomach, aimed beneath the vehicle's chassis, and squeezed off 3 precise shots. The men fell, clutching their legs. "Moving," he called out, sprinting toward the overturned truck. Bullets whizzed past his head. He slid behind the truck bed, feeling the impact of rounds striking the opposite side. Through the gunpowder smoke, he saw the money van's driver attempting to reverse. Zeke fired through the floorboard, the hollow point rounds punching up through the metal. The driver screamed, his foot jerking off the accelerator. "Van is stopped," Rook called out. "West side clear." Saint's voice came sharp and clear. "Breach the van. Breach now." Doc and Vega sprinted forward, moving like shadows. They placed shape charges on the van's rear doors. "Fire in the hole." The explosion was contained but powerful. The doors blew outward on their hinges. Inside, stacks of cash filled reinforced cases. Hard drives and ledgers were scattered across the floor. No guards. They had all been neutralized in the initial assault. Zeke moved toward the van, covering the angles while Vega and Doc secured the contents. The entire engagement had lasted less than 2 minutes. "Area secure," Saint announced. "Diesel, get those cameras ready." They dragged the cases into the morning light. The money was bundled in neat stacks. Dollars, pesos, euros, millions in cash. The hard drives promised even greater value, containing the crucial evidence they needed. Zeke withdrew his mobile device, his hands notably steady, considering the lingering surge of adrenaline within him. He initiated a live broadcast, directing the camera's lens towards the apprehended individuals. "Observe this," he declared, his voice resonating with clarity and fortitude. "This represents the illicit wealth of the cartel, the proceeds of heinous acts. Each denomination purchased complicity. Every stack financed protection. These funds were destined for Sheriff Briggs, for Clay Harlow, and for every individual complicit in their transgressions of theft and murder." He retrieved a ledger, its pages filled with records of financial exchanges. "Herein lies the price catalog for their corruption. $20,000 to overlook a homicide, $50,000 to orchestrate the destruction of a ranch, $100,000 to expunge incriminating evidence." The number of viewers rapidly escalated. Online commentary flooded the feed. Spectators were disseminating the broadcast, tagging media organizations. "They harbored the illusion of anonymity in the shadows," Zeke continued. "They believed financial influence would enforce silence. But the unvarnished truth is illuminated now. Saint had successfully retrieved the data storage devices, while the team had secured their captives. Though injured, none sustained life-threatening wounds. They would survive this encounter, and subsequently they would divulge information. Diesel applied flammable liquid to the abandoned vehicles. "Prepared when you give the word." Zeke concluded the broadcast but continued recording as they ignited the convoy. Dark plumes of smoke ascended into the early morning heavens, a visible beacon for many miles. The team operated with dispatch, transferring their gathered evidence into their own transport. The injured cartel operatives were bound with zip ties and left in the shade, provided with water. Eventually, someone would arrive to collect them. As preparations for departure commenced, Saint placed a hand on Zeke's shoulder. "You've just positioned yourself as the most sought-after individual in Texas." The sun finally ascended above the easternmost peaks, bathing the riverbed in a warm, golden radiance. The burning vehicles cast elongated shadows across the terrain, their smoke twisting skyward into the cloudless expanse like sinuous black serpents. The sun hung low over Sanro, imbuing the adobe structures with a deep amber hue. Vendors in the marketplace began to dismantle their stalls, while children engaged in a game of soccer within the dusty central plaza. The evening air carried hushed tales of El Vicar Negro, the dark-skinned cowboy who had publicly humiliated the cartel. Zeke and Sant were seated at an open-air cafe, both dressed in unassuming attire to avoid drawing attention. They observed mothers urging their offspring homeward, elderly men engrossed in games of dominoes, and the subtle indicators of a populace living under a pall of fear. "Word travels swiftly," Saint remarked, taking a sip of his coffee. "Your broadcast from the riverbed has garnered over 500,000 views." "Observe their expressions," Zeke responded in a low tone. "They yearn for the belief that someone is finally taking a stand. However, they are also apprehensive." A group of adolescents passed by, casting furtive glances at Zeke. One youth discreetly raised his fist, a subtle gesture of solidarity. Zeke offered a slight nod in return. The tranquility was shattered by the guttural roar of engines. 3 black sport utility vehicles screeched into the plaza. Cartel operatives, armed and carrying canisters of accelerant, disembarked rapidly. Pedestrians dispersed in alarm as the men charged towards the community center, where moments before children had been engaged in art activities. "Contact," Saint barked into his radio. "All units converge on the plaza." The initial incendiary projectile arced through the air, striking and shattering a window. Flames erupted within the structure. Cries of distress filled the evening as subsequent firebombs were launched. Zeke sprinted towards the unfolding chaos, Saint providing covering fire. Through his earpiece he heard the coordinated response of his team, who were moving into strategic positions around the plaza. A young instructor, coughing, emerged from the burning building, guiding 3 visibly terrified children. Zeke swiftly gathered them, ushering them towards safety, as Doc arrived to administer medical attention. "Second floor," someone shouted. Additional children remained trapped on the upper level. Diesel and Rook engaged the cartel operatives with precise volleys, forcing them to retreat from the immediate vicinity of the building. The gunmen withdrew behind their vehicles, returning fire indiscriminately. Zeke identified one of the arsonists breaking from the main group, attempting to flank the building with another firebomb. He pursued the individual, tackling him through a ground-floor window in an explosive cascade of glass and flames. They landed heavily, rolling across the floor. The fuel container clattered away. The arsonist, barely more than a youth, brandished a knife. Zeke parried the attack, twisted, and forcefully struck the boy's wrist against the floor until the blade was dislodged. "Move, and you perish," Zeke growled, restraining him. Outside, the exchange of gunfire intensified. The Special Forces operatives had the cartel members encircled. Vega and Moose were already inside, facilitating the evacuation of the upper floors. Zeke dragged his captive out through the shattered window, maintaining a firm hold. The youth struggled until Zeke increased the pressure of his grip. "Begin speaking," Zeke demanded. "Who issued the order for this?" The arsonist expectorated blood. "Go to perdition." Saint materialized, his phone already transmitting a live feed. "You'd best respond to him, son. The entire world is observing now." Zeke compelled the boy to his knees. "Inform them who dispatched you to incinerate a structure filled with children. Rafa will annihilate me." "I shall terminate you more swiftly," Zeke stated, his voice like ice. "Commence with Sheriff Briggs. Detail precisely how he permits your illicit operations." The gathering crowd swelled, their mobile devices raised, capturing every moment. The boy's gaze flickered between the cameras and the menacing firearms. Finally, he faltered. "Briggs," he stammered. "Briggs accepts remuneration to avert his gaze. $50,000 monthly. He furnishes us with patrol schedules, alerts us to impending raids." And today, who authorized this assault? Rafa, he declared. He stipulated that a message be sent, demonstrating to all towns that aid Zeke Monroe what consequences they face. An angry murmur rippled through the crowd. More individuals were streaming into the plaza, witnessing the confession. And the ranch conflagration, Zeke pressed. Elaborate on that as well. Briggs sanctioned it. He declared it would appear accidental. He asserted that no deputies would intervene. Sirens wailed in the distance, too late, as is customary. The cartel gunmen had absconded, abandoning their injured compatriots. The fire department ultimately arrived to combat the conflagration. Zeke handed the arsonist over to Diesel for apprehension. He turned to address the assembled populace directly, his voice resonating across the plaza. "They believe fear will ensure your silence," he stated. "They incinerate your edifices, threaten your offspring, and assure you that nothing will alter, yet observe your surroundings. They are the ones in flight now." Cheers erupted spontaneously. Individuals surged forward, extending their hands to touch Zeke's shoulder, expressing their gratitude through tears. An elderly woman brought water for the firefighters. Others assisted in tending to the traumatized children. The community was reawakening, apprehension yielding to indignation and resolve. Saint terminated the live broadcast as local law enforcement personnel arrived. They appeared hesitant, caught between established procedure and the palpable sentiment of the throng. One young officer actually offered a salute to Zeke before feigning preoccupation with crowd management. "Clear the injured personnel," Zeke instructed his team, "and produce duplicates of every recorded segment. The global populace necessitates observation of this." The sun had fully descended. The community center still smoldered, but volunteers were already formulating plans for its restoration. Children were drawing messages of defiance in chalk upon the plaza's paving stones. Hope, delicate yet palpable, began to blossom in the encroaching darkness. High above the town, within his opulent hillside villa, Rafa observed the unfolding events on multiple displays. A muscle twitched involuntarily in his jaw as he witnessed the confessions of his operatives achieving widespread dissemination. He gripped his whiskey glass with such force that it fractured. "He aspires to the role of hero," Rafa stated, his tone chillingly devoid of emotion. "Let us portray him as the antagonist." Dawn began to suffuse the warehouse, casting elongated shadows across the stacked crates and tactical equipment. Zeke was hunched over a folding table, laden with documents, his eyes weary yet keenly focused. Isabel's laptop screen cast a faint azure illumination upon their faces as they meticulously sorted through the collected evidence. "Examine these transaction records," Isabel remarked, gesturing towards her display. "Harlow's fictitious enterprises have channeled millions through offshore accounts, all linked to Briggs's personal charitable foundation. Can we definitively attribute this to cartel funding?" Zeke inquired, rubbing his temples. "More definitively," Isabel responded, retrieving another document. "These geological surveys reveal lithium deposits situated beneath your property, dated 3 months prior to the commencement of the initial threats." Their strategic session was abruptly interrupted by Fable, who entered carrying his communication apparatus. His movements appeared notably agitated and anxious. "Signal reception is intermittent this morning," he reported, avoiding direct eye contact. "It may necessitate relocating the antenna." While they conversed, Fable's fingers surreptitiously manipulated his secondary mobile device, concealed within his pocket. He had dedicated the preceding night to editing footage from their recent operations, interspersing scenes depicting fabricated acts of violence. His dispatch to his handler was concise. The package was prepared for delivery. Saint joined them, laying out detailed tactical charts. "Drone surveillance indicates heightened activity at Rafa's compound. They are in the process of transporting something significant." Before they could engage in further discussion, mobile phones throughout the warehouse illuminated with breaking news notifications. Local news outlets were broadcasting exclusive footage, purportedly showing Zeke's team staging attacks, complete with hired performers and simulated bloodshed. "What in the blazes?" Sayant exclaimed, grabbing a tablet and viewing the report with palpable disbelief. The doctored videos spread with astonishing rapidity. Sheriff Briggs appeared on the morning news program, positioned before a backdrop of American flags. "This evidence corroborates our gravest apprehensions," Briggs declared, his voice imbued with solemnity. Ezekiel Monroe and his operatives are domestic terrorists engaged in orchestrating violence to undermine the stability of our community. I am formally designating them as armed and exceedingly dangerous. Zeke's fist slammed forcefully onto the table. They are attempting to alienate the public against us. We must counter this immediately, Isabel stated, already engaged in typing. I have contacts within the journalistic community who will disseminate our narrative. The night erupted into chaos. The initial rocket-propelled grenade impacted the warehouse wall, resulting in a deafening explosion of concrete and steel. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, bullets hammering the structure like a deadly deluge. "Engage all sectors," Saint commanded, grasping his rifle. "Everyone to their designated positions." Zeke dove for cover as a second explosion ripped through the roof. Through the dissipating smoke, he observed figures clad in tactical gear breaching the eastern entrance, as some were adorned with cartel insignia, while others wore federal tactical uniforms. "They are coordinating their efforts," he growled, returning fire. Doc and Vega were stationed at the northern quadrant when a grenade bounced through a fractured window. Doc propelled Vega clear, but the detonation engulfed them both, sending them sprawling. "Personnel down," Diesel announced, providing suppressing fire. "We require immediate extraction." Zeke fought his way towards the injured individuals. Doc clutched his bleeding leg while Vega struggled with a severe shoulder wound. The air became thick with tear gas. "Tunnels," Saint ordered, directing the team towards their predetermined escape route. "Proceed without delay." They had anticipated such a contingency, having meticulously mapped the ancient smuggling tunnels situated beneath the warehouse. Rook and Moose assisted the wounded, while others maintained covering fire. The team vanished into the subterranean darkness as further explosions rocked the structure above. Through his night vision apparatus, Zeke observed Fable hesitate at the tunnel's entrance, casting a backward glance. "Move with haste," he shouted. They navigated the confined passages, the sounds of combat gradually receding. Behind them, heavy boots thundered through the warehouse overhead. Then, a sound reached Zeke's ears that sent a chilling tremor through his entire being. Rafa's voice commanding his men to conduct a thorough search of everything. "Sir," one of the team members called back, "have you located something? Some sort of ancient manuscript?" Zeke's heart seized. Mama Ruth's journal. In their haste to evacuate, he had inadvertently left it behind along with their intelligence funds. "No," he began to turn back, but Saint and Diesel physically restrained him. "The structure is compromised," Saint hissed. "We must depart immediately." They emerged from the tunnels into the muted gray light of early morning, approximately 2 miles distant from the warehouse. Thick columns of black smoke billowed from the structure. The distant wail of police sirens grew louder. The team regrouped within a dry creek bed. Doc, despite the throbbing pain, meticulously tended to Vega's injuries while others established a security perimeter. Isabel initiated urgent communications with sympathetic journalists, endeavoring to counteract Briggs's narrative. Zeke stood apart, his chest heaving with a potent mixture of rage and profound sorrow. The journal represented his last tangible connection to Mama Ruth, filled with her profound wisdom and the authentic history of their ancestral land. Now, Rafa possessed it. His fist struck the earth once, twice, then again with violent force. Blood streaked his knuckles. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw and ragged. "They have seized my past," he growled, dirt and ash smearing his face. "Now, I shall claim their future." The others observed in solemn silence as their leader grappled with his overwhelming fury. They had sustained the loss of their operational base, crucial evidence, and shed precious blood. Yet gazing upon Zeke's countenance, they understood with certainty that this setback would merely serve to intensify the fire of what was yet to come. Doc concluded the bandaging of Vega's shoulder. "We require more secure conditions to properly administer treatment to these injuries." "I am aware of a suitable location," Isabel stated softly. "An old mission church. Father Martinez assists individuals in disappearing from the cartel's grasp." Saint nodded in agreement. "Depart in 5 minutes. Stagger our departure route. Utilize the creek bed for concealment." As the team gathered their remaining provisions, Fable lingered behind, nervously thumbing his mobile device. His handler's latest message glowed ominously on the screen. Phase 1 is complete. Maintain your cover. Avoid any breach of contact. The morning sun climbed higher, heralding another day of dust and oppressive heat. However, for the immediate moment, the survivors of the warehouse raid could only concentrate on their subsequent move, their next inhalation, and the immense weight of all they had tragically lost. Rain hammered against the corrugated tin roof of the mountain safe house, a rhythmic drumming that mirrored Zeke's heartbeat as he sat alone by the lamplight. His fingertips traced the scorched edges of his grandmother's journal. Most of the pages had been reduced to ash. The few surviving fragments alluded to her arduous struggles, conflicts against predatory land acquisition, organized marches advocating for suffrage, and confrontations with individuals in positions of authority who held an almost divine conviction in their own power. "Your land constitutes your voice, my boy," one passage inscribed. "They will endeavor to silence both." The door creaked open, admitting a gust of damp wind. Isabel hurried inside, her rain-slicked coat shedding droplets, clutching a waterproof document case tightly against her chest. An urgent luminescence flickered in her eyes. "You must examine this," she declared, unfurling papers across the rough wooden table. "I meticulously reviewed every record pertaining to your grandmother's final years. I discovered something of considerable interest. A receipt for a safety deposit box from the First Baptist Church." Zeke leaned forward expectantly. Mama Ruth was not affiliated with the Baptist denomination. "Precisely," Isabel confirmed, extracting additional documents. "Furthermore, she filed an amended deed in 1985, yet it is absent from any county records. The original document should be located within that church's safe." Saint emerged from the shadows where he had been diligently cleaning his weaponry. "How much time before Rafa's operatives ascertain this information?" "They will not," Isabel asserted. Ruth was exceptionally shrewd. She registered the box under her maiden name. "Moreover, the church has safeguarded refugee documentation for generations." A flash of lightning illuminated the room, momentarily stark against the tempestuous sky. In that brief interval of brilliance, Zeke perceived a resolute determination etched upon every face present. These individuals, a legal scholar who had valiantly combated corruption from within, a warrior priest who upheld his word with unwavering fidelity, and 12 other operatives dispersed throughout the safe house, had placed everything at risk for his cause. "We commence our movement now," he decided, rising to his feet just as the storm threatened to intensify further. The church stood silhouetted against the turbulent sky, its bell tower resembling a dark finger pointed accusingly towards the heavens. Father Martinez met them at the side entrance, his weathered countenance grave as he guided them through dimly lit corridors towards the vault situated beneath the sanctuary. "Your grandmother," he stated, addressing Zeke, "understood that circumstances would escalate before improvement manifested. She remarked that certain truths require time to mature, much like fine wine, before they are ready for consumption." The locked box contained a leather portfolio, its contents meticulously preserved within plastic sheaths. Isabel carefully spread them upon a stone table, while Saint maintained a vigilant watch at the stairway. Zeke's hands trembled as he opened the initial envelope. The original deed was present, its anti-dispossession clauses firmly intact, embedded within legalistic phrasing that rendered the land effectively unseizable without the direct consent of the Monroe lineage. However, concealed beneath it lay something of far greater explosive potential. A microcassette and a collection of sworn depositions dated 1988. "Play it," Isabel whispered, activating a portable recording device. A voice crackled through the silence of decades. "The former sheriff, Howard Briggs, Dalton's father," the recording began. "He spoke of receiving protection payments, of deliberately overlooking the clandestine movement of Mexican heroin northward, and of a woman in Juarez who bore him a second son, Rafael Leon." The voice confessed, "My boy, the same age as Dalton. His mother named him, raised him unrestrained, while I brought up his brother to uphold the law. May God forgive me. I have spawned 2 distinct forms of monstrousness." Zeke's mind raced. "Briggs and Rafa are siblings." "Half-siblings," Isabel corrected, producing a birth certificate. "Both are sons of a corrupt sheriff, who believed he could exert control over both sides of the border. One legitimate, one concealed, both fundamentally degenerate. The revelation struck Zeke with the force of a physical blow. This was not merely a dispute concerning his ancestral land, nor solely about the cartel's pervasive influence. This was intrinsically linked to legacy, to the insidious manner in which corruption seeped through familial bloodlines like a potent poison, and to powerful men who harbored the delusion that they could manipulate both spheres of justice. Your grandmother possessed this knowledge, Father Martinez stated gently. She preserved these secrets until the opportune juncture, until an individual possessing sufficient strength could utilize them. Further documents emerged, bank transfers meticulously detailing Howard Briggs's financial support of Rafa's nascent criminal endeavors, photographic evidence depicting both brothers engaged in clandestine meetings, and finally a letter penned by Mama Ruth herself. To whomever discovers this, Zeke read aloud, his voice thick with profound emotion, understand that malevolence flourishes most effectively in obscurity. Bring it forth into the light. Let truth serve as your armament and justice as your bulwark. The storm raged vehemently outside, yet within the profound silence of the vault, the team congregated around Zeke. They observed in his expression the weighty burden of comprehension and the unyielding resolve of hardened steel. Doc spoke first. Those scoundrels incinerated your home, harboring the misguided notion that they would obliterate your history. Instead, Diesel interjected, they merely revealed their own. Moose placed a heavy hand upon Zeke's shoulder. Your commands are our directive, boss. How do we proceed with this? Zeke surveyed each face in succession. Warriors who had courageously followed him through the inferno. A legal expert who had painstakingly unearthed decades of deceit. A clergyman who had guarded truth as if it were sacred scripture. This trove of evidence was not merely a bargaining chip. It represented potent ammunition for an inevitable reckoning. Saint stepped forward, his countenance as unyielding as granite. We shall conclude this matter this very night. Thunder reverberated overhead with the intensity of artillery fire, causing the candles within the vault to flicker erratically. In that profound moment clutching his grandmother's final bequest, Zeke felt her presence as vividly as the relentless drumming of the rain against the ancient stones of the church above. The old barn groaned under the receding storm, candles casting flickering, dancing shadows across its weathered timber. Zeke stood before a rudimentary planning table, essentially planks balanced on sawhorses, upon which satellite imagery and blueprints of Rafa's hilltop stronghold were spread like a battlefield laid out in paper. The 15 assembled individuals surrounding him bore grim expressions illuminated by the wavering candlelight. Tomorrow night's charity gala, Saint stated, tapping the main entrance to the villa. The annual fundraiser for border community development. It functions in essence as a front for money laundering. Rook, their intelligence specialist, stepped forward. The guest list comprises cartel associates, corrupt officials, and genuine philanthropists who are unfortunately unaware of the true nature of the event. An ideal cover for the operation, Isabel added from her workstation. She had established a command center in a corner of the barn, multiple screens displaying streams of data, meticulously documenting every clandestine handshake occurring within a single venue. Diesel unfurled architectural plans pilfered from the municipal offices. There are 3 points of ingress. The main entrance here, a service entrance via the kitchens, and Rafa's private subterranean garage. Security will be substantial, Zeke observed, but divided between monitoring the guests and safeguarding the compound. What about the catering staff? Zeke inquired, scrutinizing the kitchen layout. Vega grinned, his scarred face catching the flickering candlelight. Already attended to. I've placed 5 of our local contacts as servers. They will disable the auxiliary generators upon receiving our signal. Doc, his arms still bandaged from the warehouse assault, indicated the surrounding hills. Drone surveillance reveals blind spots within their perimeter defenses. We can infiltrate through the olive groves at these specific locations. And the guest list? Saint inquired, looking towards Isabel. She nodded, her fingers flying across her keyboard. I have infiltrated their event management system. We have been added as minor real estate developers from Monterey. They are anticipating new capital, and will likely not scrutinize our identities too closely. Moose, their explosives expert, laid out a selection of small devices, modified flashbangs, minimal audible detonation, maximum visual disorientation. We will avoid endangering civilian attendees, but they will effectively incapacitate security long enough for our entry. Communications? Zeke turned to Fable, still harboring reservations about fully trusting him following recent events. Encrypted mesh network, Fable acknowledged, avoiding Zeke's gaze. Each unit operated independently. Isabel's mobile command center would possess override authority. The operations framework coalesced in the flickering candlelight. Teams of 3 would infiltrate from various points. Isabel would orchestrate from an elevated vantage point, poised to broadcast the entire event live. Local law enforcement had been meticulously mapped, their response times precisely calculated. Every potential obstacle had a corresponding solution. "Remember," Zeke stated, his voice resonating through the rustic barn, "this transcends mere retribution. It's about unveiling the truth, about exposing the world to the consequences of unchecked authority." He produced the incriminating documents from the church's secure repository. Birth registrations, signed confessions, and irrefutable evidence of decades of systemic malfeasance. We're not just targeting a cartel kingpin. We're dismantling a corrupt apparatus that empowers individuals like Rafa and Briggs to believe they dictate justice, Saint concurred, nodding thoughtfully. Truth carries a greater impact than ordnance. "Speaking of truth," Isabel interjected, "I've alerted my media contacts. Once we initiate the broadcast, every major news outlet will cover it. This narrative cannot be suppressed." The team then divided into specialized cadres, meticulously inspecting their equipment. Explosive charges for breaches were readied, communication arrays were tested, and comprehensive medical kits were verified. Each operative moved with the fluid efficiency honed by extensive experience. "No disguises," Zeke declared, observing their disciplined movements. "No unnecessary brutality, but avoid fatalities unless absolutely unavoidable. We are not like them. We are their antithesis." "Rules of engagement?" Doc inquired, meticulously packing additional trauma supplies. "Subdue and detain," Saint responded. "These are not trained combatants we're confronting. They are thugs armed with firearms. Strike decisively, strike swiftly, but maintain integrity." Rook presented detailed thermal imagery of the compound on his tablet. "Kitchen personnel turnover occurs at 7 o'clock. The initial guests are scheduled to arrive at 8 o'clock. We will initiate our operation at 9 o'clock, when the festivities are in full swing." "What about Briggs?" Moose inquired. "He will be present," Zeke stated grimly. "Permit him to witness his brother's enterprise crumble. Allow him to confront the legacy his family constructed." The strategic planning continued as the hour approached midnight. Every minute detail was polished, every operational position meticulously coordinated. They would infiltrate as spectral entities and emerge as the embodiment of justice. In a secluded corner, Isabel meticulously prepared her broadcasting equipment. "Once this commences, there is no turning back. The entire globe will bear witness." "Excellent," Zeke affirmed. "Certain transgressions necessitate witnesses." The tempest had fully abated, leaving a pristine night sky visible through the barn's structural gaps. The team commenced final preparations, meticulously inspecting their weaponry and adjusting their tactical gear. Each operative moved with the concentrated intensity of seasoned individuals who understood the gravity of the impending situation. Zeke stepped outside briefly, inhaling the rain-cleansed atmosphere. The moon had ascended to its zenith, an accusing orb casting a silvery luminescence across the puddles. To the south, distant lights twinkled on the horizon. Rafa's opulent villa shimmered like a defiant beacon against the darkened hills. The very hills where his grandmother had once traversed, carrying clandestine knowledge capable of dismantling empires. The same territory that had borne witness to generations of resistance against individuals who conflated dominion with rectitude. Tomorrow, these hills would bear testament to justice. True justice, not acquired through bloodshed or concealed through bribery, but founded upon unwavering truth, credible witnesses, and the fortitude to stand resolute. From within the barn behind him, he could discern the hushed sounds of warriors preparing for conflict. The metallic click of magazines being seated, the whisper of combat knives being honed, the soft murmur of individuals exchanging final directives. The illumination emanating from Rafa's compound appeared to pulsate, akin to a heartbeat against the nocturnal canvas. Soon, that heart would cease its rhythm. Soon, truth would supersede power. Presently, a melodic strain drifted from Rafa's hilltop estate, a classical quartet performing in the grand foyer. Crystalline chandeliers refracted light across polished marble floors, where the opulence of Texan oil wealth commingled with illicit cartel funds. The annual Border Community Development Fund gala was in full regalia. Zeke adjusted his borrowed waiter's attire, a silver tray laden with champagne flutes in his hand, navigating the assembled throng. His work boots had been exchanged for gleaming loafers that clicked softly on the tiled expanse. At intermittent intervals, he caught fleeting glimpses of familiar visages, politicians who had sanctioned questionable permits, jurists who had dismissed incontrovertible evidence, journalists who had suppressed narratives for pecuniary gain. Near the principal staircase, Sheriff Briggs held court, resplendent in his ceremonial uniform, medals glinting. He engaged in convivial conversation with benefactors, embodying the persona of the humble law enforcer, while his brother's security detail maintained discreet surveillance throughout the venue. "Service entrance secure," Saint's voice murmured in Zeke's earpiece. He was positioned within the culinary quarters with 3 other SEALs, all clad in staff uniforms. Charges deployed on auxiliary generators. "Roof team in position," Rook confirmed with quiet assurance. "Drone reconnaissance indicates no counter-surveillance measures. They are vulnerable." Isabel's voice crackled from the command vehicle. "Broadcasting equipment operational. All major networks are standing by. Give the word, and we initiate transmission." Zeke moved through the assembly as an apparition, meticulously noting the positions of security personnel. Rafa's operatives, clad in ill-fitting suits, attempted an air of sophistication, yet their eyes betrayed their predatory nature, constantly scanning their surroundings. He counted 16 visible guards, anticipating at least double that number concealed. The classical repertoire shifted to a waltz. On the mezzanine above, Rafa materialized, attired in a pristine white dinner jacket, his gold wristwatch catching the light. Mama Ruth's journal, a testament to her legacy, was clutched under his arm as if a trophy. He descended the stairs with deliberate slowness, savoring the moment. "Target confirmed," Zeke subvocalized, transitioning to the subsequent phase. He placed his champagne tray on a side surface and proceeded toward the service corridor. A sentry stepped into his path, his hand instinctively reaching for his concealed armament. "The kitchen requires additional ice," Zeke stated in Spanish, gesturing with an empty pail. The guard hesitated momentarily, then gestured him onward. Within the controlled pandemonium of the kitchen, Saint and his associates had already neutralized the genuine staff, their hands secured with zip ties and them confined within the walk-in cold storage. Smoke-producing devices were concealed within crates of champagne, awaiting deployment. 60 seconds, Isabel announced. "Feeds are active." Zeke assumed his designated position near the primary ingress points. Through the glazed panes, he observed Diesel's unit strategically deployed around the perimeter, posing as valet attendants. Moose's breaching charges were in place at the electrical distribution boxes. 30 seconds, Saint counted down. "God is watching, brother. Execute with precision." The classical melody reached its dramatic apex. Rafa was now addressing the assembly, expressing gratitude to his esteemed guests for their support of border communities. The inherent irony would have been amusing had it not been underscored by imminent violence. 10 seconds, Isabel declared. "Cameras are live. 5, 4, 3, 2, execute." The villa was plunged into absolute darkness. Before any semblance of reaction could materialize, dense smoke billowed from predetermined points throughout the ballroom. The quartet's performance dissolved into a cacophony of disoriented sounds. Screams erupted as flashbang grenades detonated with thunderous force. Zeke moved with alacrity, his night vision apparatus activated. 2 sentries fell before they could draw their sidearms. Precise strikes to the throat and temple incapacitated them. Saint's unit surged from the kitchen, targeting the security positions meticulously mapped during the reconnaissance phase. Clear, clear, clear. Confirmation calls echoed rapidly through the communication channels as each team secured their assigned sectors. Guests stampeded towards egress points, only to find them controlled by disguised SEALs. The obfuscating smoke generated widespread confusion, yet the team navigated through it with the predatory grace of sharks in abyssal waters. Each operative had precisely defined objectives. The corrupt magistrate attempting concealment behind a pillar. The developer frantically reaching for a panic activation device. The compromised law enforcement officers fumbling for their firearms. Briggs bellowed directives, his authority dissolving as he grasped the loss of control. He drew his service weapon, but Rook's team was prepared. A precisely aimed projectile from a beanbag round struck him, causing him to gasp and collapse. "Primary target is mobile," Doc reported. "Rafa is proceeding towards the ballroom," Zeke pursued through the smoke-laden corridors. Two cartel enforcers emerged from a side portal. He engaged them with forceful precision, their bodies impacting against walls with sickening cracks. Their expensive tailored suits offered no advantage in combat over simple street attire. Another operative swung a submachine gun in his direction. Zeke intercepted the barrel, executed a swift twist, and drove his knee upwards. The weapon clattered away as its wielder crumpled. No shots were fired, only the visceral impact of fist against flesh, boot against bone. He could discern Rafa ahead, issuing commands in both Spanish and English. The ballroom doors were in close proximity, ornate wooden panels, intricately carved with hunting motifs. A fitting detail. Saint's voice transmitted through his earpiece. "Advisory. Hostile elements are regrouping within the ballroom. Estimate at least 8 armed individuals." "Acknowledged," Zeke replied, regaining his breath. "Is the broadcast live?" "Affirmative," Isabel confirmed. "The entire world is observing. Make it impactful." Through the ingress portals he could hear Rafa's voice escalating in fury. The journal, his grandmother's journal, would be present. The tangible proof of generational exploitation and corruption held by the very individual who had reduced his home to ashes. Zeke rotated his shoulders, centering his focus. The obscuring smoke was beginning to dissipate. Sporadic gunfire echoed from an area within the villa's eastern wing. One of the units was encountering resistance. He moved towards the ballroom entrance, hearing Rafa issuing sharp commands to his remaining operatives. This was the culminating moment towards which all efforts had been directed. All the accumulated pain, all the irretrievable losses, all the protracted planning sessions would find their conclusion here. The imposing doors loomed before him. Beyond them awaited Rafa, the journal, and a form of justice that could neither be purchased nor concealed. Zeke drew one final deep breath and advanced. The ballroom doors were flung open. Gunfire illuminated the darkness. The ballroom descended into utter chaos. Shards of crystal rained down as the first ornate chandelier shattered upon the marble floor, sending the assembled guests into a panicked scramble. Emergency illumination cast a hellish crimson glow upon the scene. Smoke swirled through the air like malevolent specters. Rafa stood at the epicenter of the mayhem. Mama Ruth's journal clutched in one hand, a curved blade glinting ominously in the other. His pristine white dinner jacket was now marred with another's blood. 8 of his enforcers formed a protective cordon, their weapons drawn and ready. "You should have remained in Texas, Farmer," Rafa sneered, casually discarding the journal. It skidded across the polished floor, shedding loose pages in its trajectory. Zeke moved with the fluidity of liquid, deftly evading the wild swing of the initial guard. His elbow connected sharply with the man's throat. Another attacker rushed him, brandishing a knife. Zeke seized his wrist, applying pressure until bones audibly fractured, then utilized him as a makeshift shield against 2 additional assailants. The confrontation escalated into sheer brutality. Bodies collided with guilt-laden mirrors. Blood sprayed across priceless oil paintings. Zeke fought with chilling precision, each strike meticulously calculated from years of rigorous training. 3 enforcers were neutralized within seconds. A 4th, however, found a moment of opportune luck. His blade inflicted a long, deep laceration across Zeke's forearm. Blood soaked through his borrowed waiter's attire. The assailant grinned, then choked as Zeke's boot crushed his windpipe. "Hold him!" Rafa commanded his remaining men. "I want this personally." Two guards seized Zeke's arms. Rafa advanced deliberately, wiping his blade on a silk handkerchief. His gold chain swayed with each measured step. "Do you comprehend your fundamental flaw?" Rafa circled like a predatory shark. "You perceive courage as paramount, yet wealth dictates outcomes. Power reigns supreme. Your grandmother never grasped that verity either." Zeke's head snapped forward, striking one of the guards forcefully in the face. As the man staggered backward, Zeke broke free and charged at Rafa. They crashed through a table laden with champagne glasses. The knife slashed through the air mere inches from Zeke's throat. They grappled on the floor, rolling amidst the shattered crystal. Rafa fought with savage dishonor, attempting to gouge eyes, to bite, employing any tactic to secure a victory. But Zeke had been rigorously trained for this exact scenario, having mentally rehearsed this confrontation countless times. He seized Rafa's knife-wielding hand and slammed it against the marble surface repeatedly. Once, twice, thrice, until the blade clattered harmlessly away. Rafa headbutted him, splitting Zeke's lip. Blood and sweat mingled as they struggled. "The cameras!" Isabel's voice crackled urgently through Zeke's earpiece. "Position him correctly." With a guttural roar, Zeke lifted Rafa bodily and drove him down onto the unforgiving marble. The impact expelled the breath from the cartel boss. Before he could recuperate, Zeke pinned him face up, one knee firmly planted on his chest. "Now!" Zeke shouted. The ballroom's walls illuminated dramatically as hidden projectors activated, transforming every surface into a colossal screen displaying irrefutable evidence in high definition. Financial transfer records, property deeds, sealed judicial documents. Rafa's entire network of corruption was laid bare for all to see. Saint materialized, escorting a zip-tied Fable. The communications specialist appeared utterly terrified, his expensive tactical gear now serving as a prisoner's uniform. "Play it," Saint commanded, ushering Fable towards a laptop. With trembling digits, Fable initiated an audio file. A cold, official voice filled the ballroom. "Asset Raphael Leon is to be protected at all costs. Monroe's investigation must be contained. Employ whatever means are deemed necessary." "Again," Zeke instructed. Fable replayed the damning recording, his shoulders slumping in utter defeat. More SEALs entered, escorting Sheriff Briggs. The lawman's uniform was torn, his face bloodied from his futile resistance. His eyes widened in disbelief as he witnessed his half-brother pinned beneath Zeke. "Observe this," Zeke addressed the cameras directly. "Your protectors, your leaders, all acquired and maintained through the illicit flow of blood money." The walls now displayed further evidence. Harlow's fictitious shell corporations, Briggs's clandestine offshore accounts, cartel funds surreptitiously channeled through legitimate enterprises, years of systemic corruption meticulously exposed in high-resolution detail. "The entire world is watching," Isabel announced. "Every major network has just picked up the live feed. It's trending globally." Rafa began to laugh, a harsh, broken sound. "You truly believe this alters anything? There will always be more like me, more wealth, more influence." "Perhaps," Zeke conceded. "But not here, not any longer." Federal agents swarmed the premises, followed closely by Mexican federal police. The arrests commenced. Rafa Briggs, along with the complicit officials who had failed to escape, were apprehended. Each individual was led away in handcuffs as the cameras continued to roll. The confrontation had lasted less than 10 minutes. The repercussions, however, would resonate for years to come. Zeke's knees finally gave way. He collapsed beside one of the fallen chandeliers, exhaustion overwhelming him like a physical blow. His arm throbbed where the knife had inflicted its wound. Glass crunched beneath his palms. Saint knelt beside him, a familiar knowing half-smile gracing his weathered features. "It is finished," he stated quietly. His hand found Zeke's shoulder, offering a brief, firm squeeze. Through the shattered windows, the first rays of dawn began to paint the eastern horizon over the hills. The same sun that had witnessed the immolation of his ranch now ascended upon a new dawn of justice. Zeke could feel its warmth on his face, mingling with tears he hadn't realized were falling. Mama Ruth's journal lay nearby, its pages scattered across the blood-stained marble like fallen autumn leaves. But the truth it contained had finally been heard. The restless spirits could now find peace. 2 months later, winter gracefully yielded to spring. Dawn painted the Texan sky in delicate watercolor hues of pink and gold, bestowing a sense of promise upon everything it touched. The symphony of hammers and power tools filled the morning air at Monroe Ranch, accompanied by the cheerful sounds of laughter and an amiable intermingling of Spanish and English phrases. Zeke stood upon the freshly tilled earth of his primary field. The rich soil, dark and fertile, contrasted with his sturdy boots. All around him, precisely aligned rows of verdant shoots reached skyward towards the sun. Corn, beans, and his grandmother's cherished heirloom tomatoes. The land was mending, regenerating with renewed vigor after the devastating fire. A pickup truck rumbled up the drive, with Isabel's distinctive red sedan following closely behind. She emerged carrying a sizable stack of documents, her tailored business suit presenting a stark contrast to the rustic ranch environment. The truck bed was laden with lumber and essential supplies. More volunteers had arrived to contribute to the rebuilding efforts. "Good morning," she called out, approaching him. "I've just received confirmation from the federal courthouse. Clay Harlow's final appeal has been definitively denied. Everything is now legally settled." Zeke nodded, brushing the clinging dirt from his hands. What was the extent of their asset seizure? "Nearly 80 million in assets," Isabel replied. A smile, radiating fierce satisfaction, spread across her face. "All of it is being transferred to the Mama Ruth Community Trust. The lithium mineral rights alone will provide scholarships for 3 generations." They walked towards the barn-raising site, where approximately 24 individuals were engaged in a state of organized productive chaos. The newly constructed structure was precisely double the size of its predecessor, engineered to accommodate both livestock and vital community programs. Saint directed the operations from the central point, issuing directives with the same unwavering precision he had once employed during active combat. "Diesel, secure that crossbeam. Doc, we require the level over here." His voice resonated above the din of construction. "Looking good, everyone. Exceptionally good." Several of the original 15 individuals who had participated in the initial operation had remained, contributing to the reconstruction of what the fire had ravaged. Others had dispatched supplies, financial contributions, or skilled laborers through their established networks. The camaraderie forged in conflict now served a different, more benevolent form of justice. Near the property line, Mr. Palomo's grandchildren were assisting younger children in planting a vegetable garden. They utilized the very same heirloom seeds that Mama Ruth had meticulously preserved each season, thereby passing down a legacy far more profound than mere genetic lineage. The future was being cultivated in carefully tended rows, nurtured by small hands that intimately understood the inherent value of deep-rooted origins. "A report has come in regarding Rafa and Briggs," Isabel stated, checking her mobile device. "The federal court has imposed maximum sentences, 25 years apiece, with no possibility of parole. Their entire operational network has been systematically dismantled. 7 nations are cooperating on asset forfeiture." She paused. "And Fable received 5 years, reduced due to his cooperation. His testimony was instrumental in dismantling 3 additional corruption cases." She hesitated. "He penned you a letter, expressed his remorse." Zeke observed a hawk circling high overhead, recalling the acrid scent of smoke and the bitter sting of betrayal. "Keep the letter. Some sentiments transcend the need for verbal expression." The construction activities momentarily ceased as Isabel gathered everyone in the shade cast by a partially erected wall. She held aloft the original property deed, its edges worn from extensive handling, yet its inherent power remained undiminished. The assembled crowd grew hushed as she read aloud the critical passages. Mama Ruth's meticulously crafted legal language, designed to safeguard the land through successive generations. "This property is hereby held in perpetual trust for the sole benefit of the community." Isabel's voice carried clearly and strongly. "It shall never be sold, requisitioned, or transferred, without the unanimous consent of the Monroe family and duly appointed community representatives. Cheers erupted from the gathered individuals. Someone spontaneously began singing an old civil rights anthem. Others joined in, the melody carrying across the fields that had borne witness to both profound animosity and unwavering hope. Zeke stepped forward, unaccustomed to public speaking, yet recognizing the necessity of articulating a few essential words. Thank you all, the SEALs who answered my call, the neighbors who offered their belief when others faltered, the legal professionals who championed our cause, the laborers who are rebuilding. He swallowed with difficulty. My grandmother often remarked, "Land holds memory. These fields remember your courage." Near the main entrance, children were diligently working on a large wooden sign. Their small hands carefully painted letters in vibrant hues. Monroe Ranch, nobody's for sale. The simple inscription carried the profound weight of everything they had fought and strived for. The day's labor continued. Women from the local church arrived bearing a midday meal: tamales, fried chicken, and 3 varieties of delectable pie. The repast transformed into an impromptu celebration. People shared food and recounted stories under the warmth of the spring sunshine. Old divisions seemed to diminish in significance, consumed like chaff by the cleansing fires of progress. Even the sheriff's department had undergone a change in leadership. Deputies who had previously averted their gaze now patrolled with regularity, exchanging courteous waves with the ranch workers. Change arrived incrementally, but it undeniably arrived. As sunset painted the sky in hues of amber and rose, Zeke and Saint leaned against the newly constructed fence, observing the day's helpers departing. The meticulously rebuilt barn stood firm against the deepening twilight, already providing shelter for newly acquired livestock. Tomorrow would bring further tasks, continued healing, and sustained growth. They believed fire would break me, Zeke stated quietly, running a hand along the smooth, freshly cut lumber. As it turns out, it forged me. Saint nodded, his weathered countenance conveying understanding. They stood in companionable silence as evening descended upon the ranch. The headlights of departing vehicles traced illuminated paths home through the gathering dusk. The land stretched out expansively around them. Fields were replanted, fences were mended, and the scars of the past were slowly transforming into enduring strength. The ranch sprawled below them, a phoenix reborn from its ashes. New structures rose where older ones had been consumed by flames. Freshly applied paint signified new beginnings. Justice had been served, not through brute force, but through the unwavering pursuit of truth, the collaborative spirit of community, and an indomitable flicker of hope. In the distance, lights began to appear in the windows of neighboring dwellings. The ranch was no longer merely a solitary family's stand against pervasive corruption. It had evolved into something far greater, a potent symbol, a welcoming sanctuary, and a promise meticulously kept.